What kind of economic damage are we talking about realistically? I mean, how difficult is it to quantify this?
It is very difficult to quantify it, and that is why economists have made up their own numbers. And I use the word made up advisedly because they have simply pretended, and this is from Nordhaus's own research, that 87% of industry will be unaffected by climate change because it happens indoors. He says in carefully controlled environments, but he actually puts all manufacturing, all services, anything done under a roof, he reckons won't be affected by climate change. Now, that's right, we have no problem. If it's wrong, we're screwed. And of course, this is a crazy bad assumption. The other is that he's assuming he can use the current patterns of weather, of temperature and GDP to predict what's going to happen with climate change. And on that basis, argues effectively that Maryland, just south of New York, which is 10 degrees colder than Florida, will only suffer a 20% fall in GDP if its temperature rises by 10 degrees. But if 10-degree temperature rises occurs, according to scientists, the entire band from 40 degrees north to south of the planet will be uninhabitable by humans because heat exhaustion will be deadly for 50 days or more, even in New York.
Okay, so these, I mean, as you say, I'm not a climate scientist either, but I mean, the reality you're putting here on the table is quite worrying and relative to some of the other estimates we've heard. But the question I have to you is, I mean, what kind of economic firepower needs to be thrown at the problem? I mean, is there still time if, in fact, we were to get more resources on the table here?
If we'd started this 50 years ago when limits to growth, which is a far superior piece of research to anything done by economists subsequently, if they're wanting to be taken seriously and we'd done as they suggested, changing our trajectory from 1975 on, we could have done it gradually using things like carbon taxes and so on. Because economists have delayed it by another half century, we are putting, as a species, 3 to 4 times the pressure on the biosphere. We're not going to do it through market mechanisms. I think the only way we can actually do this is effectively a war-level footing of mobilisation to reverse the amount of carbon we've put into the atmosphere, to drastically reduce our consumption now. That's the mindset we need. And unfortunately, economists are encouraging the mindset instead that says, let's take advantage of these new transport routes through the Arctic.
Yeah.
And Steve, just while we've got you, I want to ask about the climate targets of the Paris Accord, you know, the 2 degrees. How much of that is based on the cost to human economic potential versus actual what's going to happen to the environment? Does it mean anything?
Yeah. It doesn't mean anything. We look at the IPCC report, which is written by mainstream economists, the economic section of it. The maximum damage they showed from a 3 or 4 degree increase in temperature was about a 15% fall in GDP. Now, that deliberately and completely ignored the possibility of tipping points. So even the most severe estimate was a trivial underestimate of the damage we expect. So I think we should really throw the economists out completely of this discussion and set the politicians down with the scientists to say, these are the potential outcomes of that much of a change to the biosphere. We are toying with forces far in excess of ones we can actually address.